So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about how to avoid getting to default behavior and default habits. Your old habits, some people keep falling back into the old patterns, old habits, old ways of being. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to break this cycle and actually develop new habits and crystallize the new identity or new sets of behaviors that you have found. So let's break this down. I happen to be someone who had many bad habits. I used to smoke, drink. I also had substance problem early on in my life from the age of 15. And at the age of 19, all of a sudden, I dropped everything and I got into yoga. I started to practice yoga. And then ultimately, I got into self-development and finance, and I haven't gone back since. So what were some of the key elements? And now, at the age of 29, I'm in a position where I've negotiated several multi-million-dollar deals, and I have managed to bring together CEOs of billion-dollar companies. I've negotiated with billion-dollar companies, including top law firms in the world. And how does something like that happen from someone who was not good in school, who used to avoid doing homework, who didn't perform well in exams, who flunked a class? I flunked a class and I dropped out of college. So how does someone like that, and had substance problems, so how does someone like that get into a discipline like Hatha Yoga? And I practiced it for about 8 years every single day. I would have missed, less than 10 days in 8 years. I even did it when I had fever. I did it on airports, the practice of yoga. I was so dedicated and focused on it. And for about 5 months, I did it 8 hours every single day, physical yoga, during my training. And after that, I got into finance and business. So I've evolved over the years, and I've broken many habits, and I accomplished the position that I'm in. And I want to share some experience that is based on my 15 years of experience doing this. And I managed to keep my habits. And I've managed to continue to evolve without relapsing or going back to my old ways of being. So I'm going to be talking about how not to fall into default and what actually makes you fall into default and the dynamics of it. It's a little bit of a complex subject, so stick till the end so that you have the full picture and you can implement this, and so it can benefit you. So let's look at this. So behavior comes from the environment. Good habits or bad habits are not inherent. I don't believe so. They come from the environment. We are imitators as human beings. We watch our parents do certain things, our relatives do certain things, our siblings do certain things, and we are like a sponge. You know this very well. We are like a sponge. Even if the women that you're dating or that you might have dated, or if you're a woman listening to this, the man you date, you would start to see that you tend to pick up their accent and also their habits and their way of being and everything, the way of speaking, vocabulary, and many other things. A lot of the things that we pick up from is also from movies. And so the environment shapes the mind shapes the behavior. And what shapes the mind is what goes through your eyes and ears. Okay, so whatever your eyes and ears are exposed to has the power to shape your mind, and ultimately has the power to shape your behavior and your ideology. So let's break this down. So bad habits, bad behavior, good behavior comes from the environment. And each environment has a certain ideology. Athletes think in a certain way. World champions think in a certain manner. They have an ideology. Drug addicts, they think in a certain ideology. And I happen to be part of that gang early on in my life. So I know how they think, and they have a very airtight logic, actually, of why they're doing certain things. Certain terrorist groups also have ideologies, and they have a whole justification and an airtight logic as to why they do things. And people who practice spirituality tend to have ideologies. Families tend to have ideologies. People from communist backgrounds tend to have ideologies. Capitalists, people in business and finance tend to have ideologies, ways of thinking, acting, being that exist. So you want to be very careful who you hang around with, because that's where your behavior comes from. And I'm so almost like OCD about it that I don't even want to talk to even once with someone that I don't want to be like. And I remember I was in Guthrie Castle, Dan Penya's estate, and I had just finished my training in mergers and acquisitions. And he said that if you are taking a train and someone from the seminar comes and sits next to you, just get up and leave. Don't associate with anybody that's here in the seminar. And I was like, that maybe is a little too extreme. And he says, don't share cabs going back. Just don't talk to each other. And I thought, this is a little too extreme. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to follow what he says and try it out and see for myself what works, what doesn't. And I sat down in the train, and there was an old man. He was actually successful. And we started to talk, and he said, what industry are you getting into? What's the roll-up that you're planning? In which industry are you going to be acquiring companies? I said, I'm thinking about home care. And he said, oh, home care, that's a tough business. And boom, he was a 50-year-old man. He said something. I was a young guy. I didn't know anything about home care, and it was a blank page for me. But the moment he put that in my head, it was home care is difficult. But difficult or easy is a very subjective thing. Some things are easy for someone, some things are difficult for someone, and maybe it would have been easy for me. But because he said it, now my mind is colored. It's that subtle. And that happened in less than 15 seconds. So I started to notice a pattern that whoever is in my environment, I will consciously or unconsciously adopt their behavior. My girlfriend, who I used to date a couple of months ago, whenever she would come in my environment, I would start to lose weight, because she's a fitness coach and she really is anal about her diet. So I start to watch my diet, and it's the weirdest thing. And I start to eat clean food, because she's all the time sitting and eating clean food, and I'll start to lose weight. So I started to notice this pattern that I could never think about smoking, but I hung around with smokers, I became a smoker. And people who hung around me became a smoker. Then I said, I can even never think about doing yoga. I hated yoga. I started to go to yoga classes, and before you know it, I'm becoming a yoga teacher. You know what I mean? And then I'm like, these guys, these money guys, they tend to be sick. The businessmen, they keep talking about money. I'll never be like that. I started to hang around entrepreneurs, and I started to think like entrepreneurs, and I was like, no, this makes sense. And then recently when I was in Bali and I saw the spiritual guys, and I was like on the beach, and I was like, these guys are bumps. We the finance guys, we are the smart ones. And I started to see how every environment's ideology and behaviors would rub off on me and influence me and shape my mind. And it was almost beyond my control. And a lot of the people think that, oh, I will go to the environment, but I will not get influenced. Oh, I will go hang around with smokers, but I will never smoke. And I have seen it's just a question of time when you slip. It's just a question of time when that entire conversion happens. And that is the basis of getting into default, because we are addicted to ideologies. We are addicted to environments. And it's very painful to break an environment and leave. I mean, how many of you would leave your relatives and never talk to them? Or never talk to your best friend or your friends or group of friends? That's a very painful process. And changing an environment is almost like having 15 breakups at the same time. Because you might be close to people, they might know things about you, they might know about your childhood, you've gotten used to each other, you have a little trade deals, you do this for me, I do this for you, and you may have a relationship, and you may be benefiting from many relationships in that environment, And suddenly all of that goes away and you have to depend on yourself and you have to do everything yourself. And each relationship in your life, when they come, they tend to make a place in your life by adding value to you and you add value to them. And it's a synergistic relationship. So to break all of that is going to feel like a tremendous loss. And it's very difficult. It's kind of like you being uprooted from one environment and being planted into another, which is completely foreign. And I remember in my family, we wouldn't talk so much about money, making money. And suddenly I'm in the business world where all you talk about is finance. And that can be very shocking for certain people. But there are things that are completely new in the new environment, and it's very uncomfortable because you've left the old environment. And you know that you're in the new environment, your identity is crumbling. You can see behaviors that are not aligned with that new environment. For example, in the corporate world, you got to be on time. And in my old environment, you're typically late, and it was acceptable. So even like little things like that, and I'm always on time. So even things like that, these little adjustments can be very uncomfortable. And if these are true for small things, it's true for the big things. That's why I use this example of coming on time. So you could see that each environment has these intricacies of behaviors associated with it. And your old environment is your state of default. If you want to break your behavior and become something else, someone else, have better habits, have high performance habits, or you have financial goals or even physical goals, athletic goals, you got to find that environment where you could be part of that group, or you could associate with that group and you could grow. You could embody their traits. And I started to notice I wasn't very analytical and I was very free-flowing. But the moment I got into the business world and I started to hang around with high-performance individuals who are financially very high-performing individuals, they are very analytical. They would analyze all scenarios, risks, because they have to get good at predicting future. When you're raising money and you have to return it back, you have to analyze risk and you have to analyze so many factors. Praying is not going to help. And in the spiritual communities, praying is very normal. So I started to see this dichotomy, this sort of different points of views and different ways of operating. And it's very challenging to suddenly change your operating system and becoming something completely new and doing something completely, like acting in a completely new way, thinking in a different way, speaking in a different way. There were certain terms in business that I wasn't familiar with, like retained earnings and EBITDA and all of this stuff that came into my lap, and I had to study about it. So there were things that you would face in the new environment. And so that's the change that's painful, and the transition phase is very painful. And how the default behavior stays in your life is because the people that these behaviors come from stay in your life. And if you just get rid of the people, your behavior will change. And stay that way, your behavior will change. And it's a very painful process, and you have to do it. If they are not aligned with your goals, if they are not aligned with the new ideology that you are embodying, you want to adopt, if they're not aligned with the habits that you want to adopt, then they have to go. I don't care. They know you from 15 years, 20 years, and it's going to be very, very painful. I have had times where I had dreams about my friends. I literally had pain in my chest, knots in my chest, because I missed them. I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to see how they're doing. And I could also see that because I disassociated from them and I'm associating in a better environment, my life would become better and better. And our status gap is going to increase so much that I'm not even going to be in the same country as them. I'm not going to live in the same neighborhoods as them, and we'll have nothing in common. and I have 15 years invested in this person, and all of that's gone. And if I go to help them, they don't want to be helped. They will drag me down. And that's probably one of the hardest things that I've done, is getting rid of my environment. So if you do that, and if you need to find the new environment also, because you can't be in the limbo. So how do you get to the new environment? Let's talk about that. You have to find a business venture. If this new environment, you want them to be aligned with your big goals. For example, in my old environment, making $50,000 is a big deal. But in my new environment, $10 million is also not a big deal. The bankers, they say that $10 million is a small transaction. Prithvi, come on. You have these big people. Bring us something sizable. 50 million, 100 million. There was one bank who said minimum ticket $100 million. So in one environment, if I even say $1 million, that's unbelievable. Oh my goodness, what are you talking about? You're thinking out of your ass. You're thinking out of your mind here. You got to be reasonable. And in another environment, they are like, come on, 10 million has to be the minimum, or 50 million has to be the minimum. One of the banks, Credit Suisse, I met them, they said 50 million is our minimum of our department. Not the whole of Credit Suisse, but that department, investment banking, they said minimum 50 mil. And I was like, these guys are not joking. These guys are being serious, literal. But if I say 50 million, my friends are going to be like, is he dreaming? Is he hallucinating? 50 million don't exist, that kind of an ideology. So I had to let that go. And then you might start questioning, oh, what did I say wrong? That's too much. And then you go to a bank and they says that's nothing, So how do you find good behaviors and good environments? You have to do things that these guys are doing. And if you have big financial goals, you have to get into business. And that business vehicle, that business venture becomes the reason why you meet these high-performing individuals. And because you're meeting these individuals, you're adopting their character traits. You're adopting their ways of thinking, ways of being. Everything in my life changed when I got into business of, mergers and acquisitions. Everything changed because my whole circle changed. So all of a sudden, over a period of a year, I had 100 bankers in my network. I had spoken to 300 sellers, a healthcare business owners, most of them millionaires. I had several high-profile business partners who had connections with the royal family. And so much of experience, like these 60-year-old guys who were so experienced and so ahead of the curve, and such a wealth of experience, my whole mind got reshaped. My whole behavior got reshaped. I was learning things at a rate that I had never seen. And I was adopting behaviors from my chairman, who is a CEO of a $3.5 billion company. And I was taking on his character traits, the way he talks, the way he leads, the way he sits, the way he carries himself. Like I was just picking these things up. And there were times in the night my body was shaking. Literally everything in me was being reprogrammed. And as long as I keep associating with these people, I would be in good shape. And as long as I have a strong boundary and not meet these people from my old life, I would not go back to default. But the moment I take even a step in that direction, I will go all the way down, because things tend to have a downward spiral and things tend to have an upward spiral. So one step on the other side can be a very slippery slope. And you have to have a boundary, and you got to respect that boundary and that you put around yourself, and you don't want people to come into your space. Countries, anything that has value has to be protected with a boundary. And if your mind is valuable, if your mental space is valuable, if your habits, your behavior and you as an entity, if you value yourself, you have to protect it with a boundary. And you have to make it very conditional who you're going to associate with, who you're not. When you go to a country that's prosperous, like USA or Europe, there is a process where you secure a visa to these companies, and the first thing they ask you is your financial statements. If I have to get a US visa, I have to show them my financial statements. They want to see my financial standing. Otherwise, they don't want someone who doesn't have a financial standing to come to their country, because their country is valuable and they value the resources that are there in that country. So they have a boundary, and they don't allow all sorts of people. Just like that, you cannot allow all sorts of people in your life who are not aligned with your goals and your vision. And that's how you not go back to default. Another tip to associating with high-profile people: I would not have met these people if I wasn't in business. You need a reason to meet these people. A lot of the people, they ask me, how do you network with high net worth individuals? They are not meeting people without a reason, without a purpose. They don't have time. They have a family. They have too many projects going on. They don't have the time. The best way to meet them has to be with a purpose, with a reason, something that can benefit them. And that becomes the tool of networking. It's not just about meeting without any reason. I know there is this culture, you call people without any reason. No, you always call people with a purpose. I would not have met some of the top lawyers in top law firms if I wasn't in this business. So even your business venture is going to determine what types of people you will meet and what would be their ideology. I'm into finance, so I meet very financially sophisticated individuals. And finance is regulated by laws, so I meet fantastic lawyers. And people with a lot of money get into finance. And vice versa. People who get into finance tend to make a lot of money. So I'm always around this group of people in my little network that I had to create from scratch because I didn't have any contacts. I had to make the phone calls. But when I was making those phone calls, I wasn't just chatting them up. Would you like to be my mentor? No. I had something to offer in exchange for something. I was engaging in trade. And that's probably the reason why I see guys like Donald Trump and many other successful businessmen, they don't want to stop working. And they don't want to retire. What are you going to do after retiring? Go to the beach and hang out with bums? No. Even if you don't have to work, when you do work, you tend to associate with the finest people who are productive individuals, who are into finance, who have a great mind. And it's a little community, and business is a game that you play together. Just like you play polo, golf. As a business community, business is the game that you engage in. So when you're dealing with the finest people, they're not hanging around without any purpose. They're always going into meetings with purpose. So getting into business, having a business venture, having a big project, and the larger the scale of the project, the bigger the size of the project, the better the quality of people. I shared this in one of the videos that as I was dealing with smaller bankers, their profile tend to be not that great. And then I start to meet bigger and bigger bankers, and their office spaces, their clothes, their mental faculties, the whole space was different of the conversation. The whole vibe was different as the stakes became bigger. Same thing with a small business. When I'm speaking to small business owners versus business owners of $25 million business owner of $100 million businesses, the whole energy was different. And when you're dealing with bigger and bigger stakes, naturally you tend to associate with the finest quality of people, and then you wouldn't have to worry about getting back to default as long as you have this boundary around you. So to summarize, change the environment, remove people whose behavior you don't want, and I want you to look at people from the standpoint of what habit does this person have? I don't want to associate with them. Based on habits, purely based on habits. They could be good people. I'm not saying they're not good. I'm not saying my friends are bad, but I don't want their habits. I don't want the problems that they have. And I have a boundary. So that's, you got to evaluate, draw a boundary, change the environment. And if finance is your goal, you got to get into business, because that's the best way to network with high performance individuals in the business arena, is to get into business and engage with them from the standpoint of trade. So that's today's video, and I'll talk to you soon.